the main herbal action that I think of in regards to Elecampane is as an expectorant. Now, this isn't just any old expectorant. This is specifically a stimulant expectorant. And, you know, the expectorant action is one of those herbal actions that I think is really, really important for us as herbalists to make sure that we, I guess, clarify or get into a deeper level of specificity. You know, I talked about this when, a couple weeks ago. I was talking about marshmallow and how, you know, you'll open an herb book to your expectorant action herbs and see a really big list of herbs, and you might see Elecampane in that list right alongside marshmallow as an expectorant. And, you know, if you want to get an herb for a cough and you just think, oh, they need an expectorant, I'll just choose an expectorant. Well, not all expectorants are created equal. So Elecampane specifically is a hot, spicy, pungent, aromatic stimulant expectorant. What does that mean? Well, that means that the oils and the resins that are present in this plant, in a way, they kind of irritate the respiratory mucosa. They stimulate that respiratory system so that a cough can be more productive. And so this is, the stimulant expectorants are those that we typically use when the cough is not productive, it's superficial, like the cough, and this is one of the specific indications for Elecampane, is when the cough won't go deep enough to get up all the stagnant mucus that's present. So we typically use a stimulant expectorant when there is an excess of dampness and phlegm and mucus accumulation within the lungs. There's a cold, damp tissue pattern within the respiratory tract. So as a stimulant expectorant, this is, in my opinion, I think it's one of the best. This is a primo stimulant expectorant plant. And because it's so stimulant, we also see it having the action of being a stimulant diaphoretic. So it can be used to help break a fever. So if someone has a cough coupled with fever, they feel cold, their skin is pale, they're running a fever, but they feel cold. They're getting chills and shivers and things like that. And they've got a cold, phlegmatic, damp cough. Elecampane is an amazing remedy to consider here. It's going to bring the blood up to the surface, open up the capillary beds, warm up the person so that they can start producing a sweat and lowering that fever. So we have stimulant expectorant alongside a stimulant diaphoretic, and this is just such a useful combination of properties here that definitely should become a staple in your respiratory Materia Medica, in your use of remedies for treating acute respiratory problems. So alongside that stimulant expectorant action, we also see its respiratory trophorestorative. And, you know, there's not really a ton of herbs that we tend to think of as being like restorative to the lungs. You know, one of the other remedies that I tend to think of here would be like astragalus. Astragalus is a really great respiratory trophorestorative. Cordyceps mushroom is also really great rejuvenative for the lungs. I've also used schizandra berry here for that, as well as reishi mushroom. But in terms of, and a lot of those are all Chinese herbs, right? Reishi, schizandra, astragalus, you know, these are all Chinese remedies. In terms of Western herbs, there isn't really a ton of plants classified in this way. But what that means is when you take Elecampane, what's happening is it's penetrating deep into the mucosa. It's reaching in, so to speak, to the bronchioles, to the lungs, and it's dredging up this kind of old, thickened, congealed phlegm mucus, helping it to lift away from the respiratory tissue so that it can be expectorated and coughed up. But this is really great for long-standing respiratory conditions. People that get a cough and the cough just kind of never goes away. They have a hard time breathing, hard time taking deep breaths. One of the main indications that Matthew Wood discusses is that this herb is really great for folks that get long-standing respiratory conditions that ultimately lead to asthma. And this is where that acrid flavor comes in handy, where there can be tension in the bronchioles, that there's a difficulty breathing and everything feels kind of tight and constricted. There can be pains in the chest, and again, just that difficult in coughing up phlegm and mucus. So we've got a stimulant expectorant, a stimulant diaphoretic, a respiratory trophorestorative, and then this herb also has an action on immunity. So, you know, it's very antiseptic. So all of the resins and the volatile oils, and I believe there's sesquiterpene lactones present in this plant as well, all have a very distinct antiseptic property. So it's really, really great for treatment of bacterial infections, especially when we see the coloration of the mucus is that yellowish to green color. And you know, it's said that, you know, when people are coughing up this phlegm and it has that dark green yellow color, you start taking Elecampane and all of a sudden it turns lighter and lighter and lighter until you end up producing a clear mucus, which is, you know, what we ultimately want in the respiratory system. That green-yellow mucus typically is an indication of a bacterial infection present there. So it's really great for clearing infection in the respiratory tract. So that's great because it's not just helping you remove the mucus, but it's also addressing the, you know, essentially the root cause of it being infection. So that's a super useful property. And then from there we have it does have an action on the digestive system. And one of the things with Elecampane is that when there's so much mucus present in the lungs, a lot of the times that mucus can actually get down into the gut. And so when you get too much mucus in the stomach, sometimes people get indigestion, upset stomachs, they can even get nausea. In fact, the action of purging, right, of vomiting, does clear the lungs. This is why a lot of plants that tend to trigger vomiting tend to be respiratory remedies, right? Some of our classics there being herbs like licorice root, calamus root, lobelia. These are all herbs that can help to instigate vomiting, but they also clear the lungs. And that's a principle outlined in Ayurvedic medicine where they say that when kapha or phlegm mucus accumulates in the stomach, it can reflex into the lungs and end up with mucousy lungs. That's why people with like a dairy allergy know that truth all too well. You eat the sour cream or the cheese or drink the glass of milk, and all of a sudden you get a little phlegmy cough. That's too much mucus in the stomach reflexing into the lungs. Well, the reverse is true as well, that if you get too much phlegm in the lungs, it can end up trickling, get swallowed basically down into the throat and into the stomach and lead to indigestion type symptoms. And so this is one pattern that Elecampane is really, really great at addressing: excess phlegm in the stomach, the upper GI, in the intestines. As an antiseptic remedy, it's really great for infection in the gut, indigestion due to infection, lymphatic stagnation, the galt or the gut associated lymphatic tissue, when those become swollen and stagnant, too much damp accumulation in there, Elecampane is really good for clearing out that phlegm, clearing the infection, moving the lymphatics, and just making everything nice and shiny and clean in the gut. So that is another really great property that we have here associated with Elecampane. So those are some of the main actions that we see associated with this plant and some of the core affinities.